get to. Thank you, Major. Appreciate you. We're going to call on District 4 tonight for our invocation as well as for our police.
I've asked our pastor, Kevin Phillips of the Mineral Spring First Baptist Church to open ourselves in prayer.
Let us pray. Father, we're very thankful for another day of life, for health and strength, for every blessing, for every good thing. God, we know that all these things come from you, and we give you glory. God, we thank you for those in this room tonight that make the decisions and that serve us in Putnam County so well. Thank you, God, for the sacrifices they make, for the wonderful job they're doing. Thank you, Lord, that you're here with us tonight. Bless them, give them wisdom to make the decisions they need to make. I pray that you'll continue to bless us, prosper us, watch over us, Lord. Again, we honor you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you will take your handsets and everybody press yes for me and stop right there, please. Everybody press yes and stop right there. All right. Is Mr. Redline absent?
He is.
Okay. Let me get his handset. Press confirm. Please press confirm. Oh, that's the sound I love to hear. Mr. Chairman, we have 23 present, 1 absent. There is a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Item 5, approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Favor the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 6, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting.
Motion to approve. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Favor the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Unfinished business, planning,
No unfinished business, Mr. Chair.
physical review,
No unfinished business.
nominating.
No unfinished business, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairs. Item B, report of special committees. We will hear a report from Rules Committee under this heading. Mr. Ebersol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last Monday, the Rules Committee met, and there were several changes to our current rules. There's one language change, and also bringing our rules up to meet what the TCA says that we need to have. You should have a copy of that. There is one change that needs to be made to that the Rules Committee had voted on. Under the old Rule 5B, agenda to commission members, we took out the postmarked part of it, and it should say under the new rules that instead of emailed, should just say mailed to each commissioner. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
My understanding is these will be presented, they won't be voted on until next month. There's a 30-day waiting period. Any questions to the Rules Committee concerning them? All right, thank you, Mr. Ebersol. Other unfinished business? Hearing none, report of standing committees, Pleddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 1A recommends approval of a resolution concerning Putnam County's occupational safety and health plan required by TOSHA, and I so move.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? In favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, no. Motion carries.
Item B recommends approval to set the speed limit for Carlisle Road. It's come to my attention that we're not able to go under 30 miles per hour for a county road, so I'd like to make an amendment on that motion that we do it at 30 miles per hour, and so move on that.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Help me here, Mr. Jones. Can we do that legally since it's on the agenda at 25? Do we need to go back through through road? I'm not trying to create problems, but. And I assume that's what you're doing, Mr. Chair, is amending the motion to 30. All right, I got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Thank you. In favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, no. Motion carries.
Item C recommends approval of the amendment to the Corrections Committee resolution, and I so move.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? In favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries.
Item D recommends approval for Putnam County EMS to sell the following vehicles at internet auction: a 2010 ambulance chassis, you got the VIN number there, and also a 1996 Crown Victoria, also the VIN number you have with your packet. And I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Once again, you favor the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And noes if you don't. Motion carries.
Item E recommends approval of an amendment to the Health and Safety Ordinance from the County Powers Act to match the change in the TCA code, and I so move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Mr. Shanks.
We have, Mr. in the audience here, Callahan. Would you like to speak? Come right up here.
Please, when you do, state your name into the mic, if you would, please, sir.
I've been 43 years about the yard law that you're wanting to pass. I don't own
If, sir, and I apologize for interrupting. I believe that we're on item E, which is on the OSHA law. You're next, if you don't mind.
Okay.
And again, I apologize. Wasn't sure what you were speaking toward. We are on item E, folks, as it relates to Health and Safety Ordinance from the County Powers Act, match change in the TCA code. Ms. Jenks, are you good?
We on E or D?
We're on E, sir.
Okay, I'm on D. I want him, he wants to talk on D.
Okay. Mr. Ford.
I was looking for that, Mr. Chairman. I was reading on it. From what I've read on that, have we added some more to that than what we already had when that started out?
According to what we're facing at this point, Mr. Ford, we're only changing to match this TCA code. And it looks like Mr. Jones wants to speak to it. So.
I think I can clear up any confusion. Under the previous set of regulations under the County Powers Act, according to the Tennessee Code, you had to exclude owner-occupied residences from the County Powers Act. Well, there was a private act passed, if you'll remember, pursuant to a resolution that was adopted by this commission to include Putnam County within the population brackets to allow us to apply our County Powers Act to owner-occupied residences. So that's all that you're voting on tonight as far as this item is concerned. is to amend your County Powers Act to include what the Tennessee legislature has already passed and what you guys have already approved, okay? Yeah.
Take care of Mr. Ford. Any other question or discussion on item E? All right, favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries.
Item F recommends approval of a request from the Health and Safety Board for a private act that deals with junk and scrap yards, and I so move.
I got a motion and a second, and now I believe this is the issue to which you wish to address, Mr. Harrell.
I understand the position that people have that are for that, but as I stated, I've been in business in Putnam County for 43 years. I've been in the automobile business for 43 years. I've been in the auto parts business for 37 years. And there's enough laws on the books, state and federal, to take care of any objections that anybody would have along those lines. As a business person, there's enough rules and regulations on all the laws to where it's next to impossible to make enough money to pay all your bills. I pay a little over $8,000 a year in county and property taxes. I pay a little over $10,000 a year in tax on insurance and things. And you know, I just, under the laws that are being passed in the state, you keep on clamping down on businesses, and it's going to get to where they can't anybody make it. And I'd like to point out that if anybody runs a junkyard or whatever, they've got to have enough laws, enough insurance and things to cover it. And if you were wanting 100-foot setback on that, who's going to pay property tax on that 100 foot that they can't use for their business? And if you're on 2 streets, which I am, who's going to pay property taxes on that 200 feet that you can't use? I just feel like there's enough already out there to cover what your issues are about them. Like I told you, I'm not in the junkyard business, but I am a rebuilder of the automobile business, which I do scrap out some vehicles. And also, you want an 8-foot fence around it. The people, which I do, and I double. On the laws. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Harrell. We appreciate you being here and your comments. Mr. Short.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Randy, weren't we addressing particularly homeowners and not junkyards? Expound on that, please.
Well, currently there is no state law that addresses the junkyards that we're looking at. The only junkyards that are addressed in state law are the ones that are within 500 feet of a state highway or within 1,000 feet of a interstate, I believe is right. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong on that. What we're seeing is out in the county, I don't think Mr. Callahan would even be affected by this. Used car lots are not affected by this. We're looking at in a residential area where you've got houses around it and somebody goes and buys the piece of property in between them and puts starts stacking cars or junk in that part that causes the properties around that to devalue. It also causes problem with rodents and so forth. And if we had a state law that addressed it now, the committee wouldn't even be asking you to look at this. but there is no law, and I'd be glad to show you some pictures of some of them if you wanna see them. There's some pretty bad, circumstances out there, and we're not trying to stifle business. I'm all for business and, not for any more regulations than we have to have. This is a protection in my mind, that if you go out and you look at these, if you live beside of it, I don't think any of you would want it beside of you. And it's set forth to where that this county powers board, can make the decisions on each one of them individually as to, if we don't get a complaint on a place, we're not gonna be out trying to do anything to it. We're looking at the ones that we're receiving complaints on from the residences that live around it, so it's not.
You and I had a short conversation about grandfathering, and isn't he already subject to the laws that he's already following, and therefore we're not applying to, it doesn't apply to his business, isn't that correct?
No, they're not gonna be grandfathered in if we get complaints on them. If they already are in existence and somebody's complaining on them in a residential area, the ones that just went in the last year or two, we would be looking at trying to make those folks at least scoot it back from off of the road, so they're not sitting out next to the road or right on a property line. We've got a couple that they're putting the old junk cars right on the property line of the individual right beside of them that lives in that house. That's what we're looking to protect, or put up a fence that keeps it from being visible and hurting the property values. So it's a problem. I think it's gonna be even a more growing problem because of the price of scrap metal has went down so much, and they're not being sold. These old cars aren't being sold. They're holding them to take and sell them at a later date, hoping the scrap metal will go up. Does that answer your question?
If we all agree that there's a need for what you're doing, is this affecting people who are already in business and subjecting them to redefinition of the laws we don't already have in place?
If he lives out in the county, but if he's inside the cities, it does not affect him. If he lives out in the rural part of the county and his business is complained on by residential property that's beside of him, that's devaluing their property or causing problems, then the board would have to make a decision if they want him to put up a fence or fall under these regulations. Am I saying it right, Jeff? And Jeff will be glad to speak to it too. It's already been before the county powers board. 4 of the commissioners are on that board. They looked at it in depth over the last few months, and then the recommendation is to you is that we ask the state legislature to pass a private act. You vote on it tonight if you decide to do that. It will go to the state legislature. The private act, if it's passed there, then will come back to you, and you'd have to vote on it again before it goes into law. But my thing is if you're not gonna be for it, the next time it comes back to you, once it passes the state legislature, don't be for it tonight, because I don't wanna put our lawmakers, having them run this through and do it if you're not gonna vote to put it into effect once they pass it. So it needs to pass with 2/3 majority tonight. And if anybody wants to see the pictures, I'll be glad to show you some of the trouble spots. Can you switch me, Wayne, so we can? You can see it. Jeff, do you have one of those? Road. This one. This one is on Pippin Road. This one is on Old Baxter Road. This one is on Shipley Road. That's a closer up view of Shipley. They're putting them all over the side of the hill there on Shipley Road. It's unbelievable how many cars that they've already put on that one. That one is back on the other side of Shipley Road where we showed the picture before, showing you another view of it. They still almost out on the road and getting real close to being on the right of way. And you've got residential houses that live around every one of these. And that's just a few, excuse me, a few of them. There's more that I could show you, but I just brought you a few to give you an idea of what we're talking about.
Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, that one there, they're not selling parts, they're just storing them, they're not selling parts.
As far as I know, all I know is they're putting them in by the hundreds almost on this piece of property, and it devalues the property around, the people that live around these, that have built houses, it devalues their property. It causes rodent problems with rats and mice and so forth coming on their property. And then the problem it causes to the land when you're leaking diesel or gas and oil and transmission fluid and antifreeze onto the land. I mean, someday something's gonna wanna happen with these, and these folks are probably gonna go away. Who's gonna be there to clean it up? And you know those places that are in the county today and in some of the cities that were built years ago, that nobody wants to touch today, and we can't do anything with the land because the land's been damaged so much. So, just looking to protect the citizens that live around these situations, not trying to put anybody out of business or to prohibit business, but to protect the citizens and their property that's around them.
Was that, Mr. Short, that take care of you? Mr. Shanks, I believe you were next?
I was just gonna ask a roll call vote.
All right, we'll do that. I'd like to, Mr. Medley, I believe, had a question?
Yeah, Randy, who's gonna be the one that actually determines this, find these people or whatever?
It'll be our codes officers will go out and take pictures and of these issues, and then Mr. Rogers, who's the chairman of the County Powers or Safety Board, Jeff Jones and myself, if there are just violations that are just easy to do, then we make the decisions. If there's any questions about them, it goes to this board and they make the decision as to what to do with them.
This ain't gonna cause us to have to start hiring more code officers here.
No, sir.
Mr. Ebersol?
Why would this not be covered under our current County Powers Act?
Jeff, you wanna talk to that? We originally thought it might have been, but it's not.
According to the statute that granted grants counties the authority to adopt under the County Powers Act, Health and Safety regulations, there was an exclusion for, it says, terms shall not include, items on the premises of an automobile graveyard within the meaning of the code. So there's a specific exclusion under the County Powers Act. And this is the reason why that, we're bringing a private act before you guys tonight. This is exactly what Warren County did back in 2001 for this very reason, so they could regulate it. And it's actually worked in Warren County as well.
Are these residences, are these ongoing businesses, or?
Some of them are brand new, some of them have been put in the last year or two, and some of them have been there several years. They're all ones that I've received complaints on from multiple residences that live around.
But they're not businesses. These are, or are they businesses?
That one was big.
Depending on what your definition of a business is.
That's right.
Some of them are and some of them aren't. And another thing that you gotta think about, we're a growing county. We have all kinds of companies that are looking in. I've got a big company coming in tomorrow that's looking at us to bring in jobs. We have them all the time. And if you think that they only come and drive downtown and look and see how downtown looks, they don't. They go out in the county and they'll drive around to see how we're maintaining our county. And if they see that we're doing a good job of it, it makes them want to come locate here. If they see that we're not, then it makes them not want to come here and locate. So I think it's a multifold issue that it protects our residences and it protects new businesses coming in and it protects for the future.
It has to go through legislation.
The state has given you. As I read a little while ago, right now, so the health and safety regulations that you adopted were everything that you could adopt at the time. Now, we changed that earlier, as you guys voted on, for private act. Now, we're within the population brackets to include owner-occupied residences. Okay, so that's good. So what the county board, Health and Safety Board, is trying to do is just get another tool in the toolbox here. to try to do the things that Randy's speaking of.
Mr. Wiseman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jones, as you mentioned a moment ago, I guess Warren County had passed this, and I'm not sure if other counties have as well, but would you or Mr. Porter maybe have some examples of how this has maybe worked in some of these other counties where they passed this?
I talked to the Warren County, mayor, and this is the one, the private act that we're using, we used theirs to copy it by. He said it worked great down there, that it had stopped their problems. He said with a few of the existing ones, it took a little while to get those worked out. The ones that had complaints on them, he said it had totally been a good thing for their counties.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning too, just a moment ago too, that it is an impact on some of these, job creators that come to our county and everything, because not only are, like you said, they're not only just driving down the commercial areas, but they're also seeing, areas that might reflect back on our citizens, and they're looking for, I think, the better elements there as far as the clean areas and that sort of thing, and that's something that we definitely want to try to uphold there, so we appreciate you mentioning that too.
Yeah, and the other thing I mentioned too is the cities, all your other cities, as far as I know, already have this. I mean, they don't allow new ones to come in and be opened up, so this is just, they've had it for, most of them for several years, so this is just for the folks out in the rural part of the county that don't live in the cities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ford?
Oh, I was looking at some of those, they look like, the ones out off of Shipley Road, and I think you said Forest Road, they look like, I can't remember that old boy's name, he's been up here on us 2 or 3 times. He's the one that had talking about being in business, he had the pot business out there and had the hours posted when you go down, what time he was open, what time he went to lunch for a long time. But he's had those little cars out there, him and Rabbit Tays, for years. I was thinking that was, if it's not, it's awful close to the city limits.
It is close, but it's just outside of the
Just
county.
right outside. I have a problem doing this to people that's been there so long as he has. You know, Rabbit Tays and them, they've been out there since I was a kid and then have to come in. And most places around there don't look much better. Somewhere close to me.
Well, and the thing about it is the county powers board will have the authority, if they look at it and say, you know, that's been there for 25 years and we just want you to put up a fence, or we just want you to do that, they have the authority to make the decision if they want to, as to what they want to have the person do. It won't be just a ironclad automatically.
Way around that, well, like him, he just keeps bringing more and more in there, and he never sells anything. He used to be down there, and you couldn't see him down that big old hole, but now he's all the way out on the road. So, I mean, something could probably work out with him, but he's crazy. Some of you been up here don't remember coming up here, but
Can they quote you on that, Mr. Ford?
I'm gonna put that in a minute.
Any other discussion? Any other
he's worse
questions?
than I am.
Mr. Shanks has asked for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll take your handsets, if you favor the motion tonight, we're on planning F, then vote yes. If you're not in favor of the motion, vote no. Everyone please vote and stop right there. Remember, it does take 2/3 majority tonight for this to pass, so it will take 16 votes for it to pass. Mr. Shanks. All right, all votes are in. Does anyone wish to change their vote anywhere? All right, ladies and gentlemen, please press confirm for me. Everybody press confirm, please. Whoops. Mr. Chairman, you have 15 yes, 8 no, 1 absent, no abstain. Motion fails to carry the 16 amount. Motion fails.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Item under plan recommends approval to add to the official.
In a second, any discussion? Signify by saying aye. Opposed, no.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Oswald. Fiscal review.
Fiscal Review recommends approval of budget amendments to the county general fund.
What, did you move?
Was that a motion?
Motion to approve.
I've got a motion, now I need a second.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second, any discussion? All right, Mr. Clerk.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, take your handsets. You favor of the motion, vote yes. If you're not in favor of the motion, vote no. Everyone, please vote. Stop right there for me, please. Mr. Rogers. Are you having trouble there, brother?
You wanna give me a battery, maybe?
Uh-oh. All right. Excellent. Anyone wish to change their vote anywhere? Please press confirm for me, if you would now, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody press confirm, please. All right. All right, Mr. Chairman, you have 22 voting yes, 1 no, 1 absent, 0 abstain. Motion carries. Now, just a second, please. Thank you, sir.
Fiscal Review recommends approval to apply for Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development for a Community Development Block Grant for fire protection. Requires a 15% match, and I so move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, any discussion on the motion? We can voice vote, so if you favor the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries.
Fiscal Review, consider approval to refinance general obligation school bonds series 2007 in the amount of $53,250,000 with the adoption of an amendment to the debt management policy and all necessary documents needed for the refinancing. This comes with no recommendation.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
I've got a motion and a second, now we'll have discussion. Do you want to present Mr. Porter first? All right.
I hand you a sheet out that's got all the information on it that, been waiting on this bond, recall to come up, ever since I took office to allow us to, save some money and open some debt capacity. I wanna make sure that everybody understood exactly what we're doing and what my recommendation is, our financial advisor, and CTEST and the comptroller's office. So, it's a 2007 school bond that's currently at 4 3/4%. Looking at refinancing it, and we don't know what the bond rate will be till the actual day that we sell the bonds, but we're estimating that to be somewhere around 2 1/4 as it is right now. Bond rates have come up some just in the last month. Save the county approximately $730,000 a year. That's a snapshot though as of last week. That could change depending on what the bond amount comes out to be on that day. Currently, according to the comptrollers, and when we question them, we have no bonding capacity for any future bonds right now, unless you have a tax increase to bring in some more revenue to pay for those bonds. What this $730,000 estimated savings will do would open up a little bit of bonding capacity where the county would at least have about $10 million if they was to need to do a bond in the near future. Right now, the Fed have raised interest rates twice in the past year. They announced last week they're looking at raising them 3 more times this coming year. The quicker we get in and get it refinanced, the better off that will be, and I think the better rate we'll get. The 10-year bonds rose 1.2% in just 6 months, or actually a little less than 6 months. That's unheard of for it to be moving that fast, but it is what it is. What I'm looking at is that $730,000 going into county's debt service fund balance. We would start drawing interest on that. If the rates are rising, our interest is going to be rising as to the point that we will be receiving for that money. And it allows us to have that debt capacity should you need it in the future questions the other night, that money, and you could, rates keep going up at a very, as far as what we could now. In my mind, it's all about the risk reward. I think we need to have a small amount of debt capacity if we can have it. We've got another bond coming up in 2018 that we can refinance. We possibly, between those two bond refinancing, depending on what the interest rates are going to be in 2018, when we do it, we could have approximately $15 to $20 million worth of bond capacity that you would have if you needed it to instead of having to raise taxes. My number one thing, and I'm no bones to pick, is to not raise taxes unless we absolutely have to. This gives you that opportunity, should you need to do a bond in the future, to keep from doing that. When you start looking under the facts, I went back and I've been looking at this for a while. We even talked about it in some of the budget committee meetings. Our debt service in 2010, our fund balance was $17.5 million. Our estimated debt fund balance coming up this time is $9.8 million. You can see how hugely that it's dropped down. We paid off a bond early, which took about $6 million. We've been taking out, and I'm not against schools, I'm all for schools. You gave them about $1.5 million in sales tax that's not going into it. We've got a lot of roofs. We're doing a lot of capital projects. And thankfully, we've got that extra sales tax money each year so far that we've been able to start and do those projects. If we didn't, we'd be having to try to borrow money to put these roofs on. We need about $14 million to pay our bonds annually. Right now, we don't have enough in our fund balance, should something major happen, that we could totally have a year's worth of bond payments that would be sitting there. To me, that's something that we need to be looking at doing. When you look at our sales tax, it's doing great. So far, the first 6 months of the year, it's flat. But we set a record last year. So being flat is a pretty good thing, but there's no way to predict what that's going to do in the future as far as going up or down. And you can't, only about $9.2 million of our bond payments come from property tax. The rest of it, we're counting on sales tax and hotel motel tax to make those payments. That fluctuates up and down, and there's no way to guarantee that what those are going to be in the future. Possible projects that we got there, I listed them for you. We've got $10 million worth of roofs that we're going to have to do in the next 4 or 5 years. If we don't, we'll lose the buildings. Y'all seen some of the problems that you've had over the years. Capital projects, Mill Creek Road, Randy's fixing to bid out the rest of it. That money's going to come from somewhere out of fund balance, probably out of county generals, where I'm going to propose. Once we get the bids in, we're a growing county. Our transfer station is maxed out. We've got nowhere to build any more on to it. We're going to have to do something with it in the near future. New schools.
Sorry.
That's okay. We just got a lot, I think, in the future that you need to be looking at. And what I'm trying to do is look down the road a few years into the future. I think this gives you a great opportunity to fix a problem and to save quite a bit of money. In the end, this is my recommendation. Okay? Ultimately, it's your decision as to what you want to do. I have our financial advisor here, Mr. Rick Delaney from Raymond James. If you have questions of him or if you have questions of me, I'll be glad to try to answer.
Mr. Savage.
I was the one that brought a lot of that stuff up last week, and I've talked a lot with Randy, and I've done a lot of work. And I want to amend the motion, okay, based on $730,000 savings a year. We apply $130,000 of that to principal. The $600,000 savings can be applied to debt service. That should still allow us, in the same time, about a little over $8 million bonding capacity instead of $10 million. It's about an 82% difference between the money saved, so it should be really close to about $8 million. Which still, it's a little bit of both. It helps us we're still well over $140 million in debt. And I know everybody says money's not going to get any cheaper, and that's fine, but if you're out of debt, or you're closer to out of debt, things are always a lot more manageable. And this will lower that final payment by over $1 million in the 10th year. So you take that $1 million that you won't have to pay for 10 years, there are some savings there. Not as much, but it still helps offset. And so my motion is, with the refinance, part of the 130 would be going, the bond, they'll increase from, right now they're unchanged. They'll increase it $1, and it will still funding capacity.
I've got an amendment to the, did I hear a second? Then let me make sure I understand your motion, if I may. Are you recommending exactly 130 or whatever is over 600,000 to be applied? I mean, we're not sure, I don't guess, exactly what we're saving, I guess. So my question is, how do you want to break that out?
I'm not really sure either, because if it's more than 730,000, I don't care if it's only 130,000, but I don't want it to be less than 600,000. I want 600,000 in savings. I'd like to see that.
So would your motion then read anything over 600,000 in saving should be applied to? No?
No.
Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no. I don't want to put. If it comes out 730,000, 130, 600. If it comes out 750,000, I'm good with 130 and 620.
So your number is 130?
Yeah.
Okay, just so long as we understand. Any other discussion concerning the amendment?
Who seconded that motion?
Scott.
Scott?
Is there any discussion concerning the amendment now that we're on the amendment? Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spoke with the comptroller 2 weeks ago, roughly, on this refunding, and I understand what Commissioner Savage is saying. I'm all for paying down our debt as much as we can. But when I spoke to the comptroller and told him our plan about refunding and saving roughly at the time $800,000, now it's $730,000, they were ecstatic about it, because our capacity in their eyes would not allow us to borrow any more money going forward until we increased our fund balance, which would increase our capacity to borrow. I have to stick with what the comptroller instructs us and recommends us to do, and that would be to put our savings back into fund balance. That way we can build our capacity, because the goal is, and my goal is, we got to get out of backloading debt. Our next issue, whatever it may be, instead of putting all the principal at the end, pay even amounts of principal starting in year one, instead of paying $100,000 and paying the last year paying $10 million. We got to get out of that. And the comptroller now, compared to about 10 years ago, they're not allowing it anyway. So our structure of debt needs to stop being backloaded, and in order to do that, we got to have the capacity on the front end to pay more principal up front. Thank you.
Commissioner Blair.
So what you're saying, Commissioner Rogers, if we was to redo this, it would add more onto the front to get our borrowing capacity out there?
Which way? Chris's or the motion, original motion?
The amended part.
The amended part would give us more capacity on the back end, not on the front end. And on the front end, I'm looking at having more capacity on the front end, because I'm guessing in the next couple of years we'll have a debt issue that we need to do, a project. And if we have that capacity on the front end, we'll be able to first of all get approval by the comptroller's office, because they look at our fund balance and they look at our debt scheduling. And second, be able to put more principal on that new issue.
Okay. We talked about this the other night at physical review, and I understand what Commissioner Savage is trying to do. I'm all for, and I think everybody up here will say the same thing. Everybody's up here to try to save the taxpayers the most money they can. Thing I'm looking at is, though, this is different than refinancing your own home, a vehicle. This is business. I think we're rolling the dice if we do this. Projections, I believe you said last week, Chris, was 15 million something at physical review. 14 million had come in. Did I misunderstand you?
Yeah, we have budgeted that, yes.
Okay.
Almost 15 million.
Right. That's projected. Or is that guaranteed?
Well, nothing in life's guaranteed.
Thank you. That's what I was fixing to say. There's no guarantee that we're gonna get this money to backload it, middle load it, front load it, however you wanna look at it, with what their financial advisor has given us. And I'm assuming this is the best scenario for us to do. For the county, the taxpayers. This is pretty much guaranteed. Right. But it's closer than what we're looking at. I'll say it again, I said it last week, I think we're rolling the dice if we gamble with this. I think we need to go with it. You know, we're playing with taxpayers' money here. It's just, that's the way I feel.
Again, we're discussing, the amendment, Mr. Martin.
Understand. That's all into, and I haven't heard anything. I believe we were given, what I'm reading here, our debt service balance has moved from 17.5 to 9.8 million currently. That's not going the right direction. If we could anticipate the future, it'd be great. Problem is, our tax revenue might not come in like we budgeted. We do not need to make a decision tonight, in my opinion. We shouldn't be making decisions on the future revenue. It's good for budgeting, and we have to. But to set a course on what we do on our savings starting now with an amount of 130, I just don't think that's good, wise management. Cash, we need a certain amount of cash available. I think our expert out here, Rick, would tell us that when you look at a bonding issue, the bonders that handle this, am I correct or not? One of the first things they look at is liquidity. We don't know what's ahead of us, and I'm looking at what you gave us, Randy. I add up to $16.5 million in 3 items. Now, what do we do if we have another major ice storm, or we have something major going on the roads, or we have a bridge, or we have something that we don't anticipate? If we have available cash, then we're in a position to spend without having to raise tax. So I think we're putting ourselves in a very vulnerable position if we try to anticipate and start on a course of reducing debt before we get to cash. Thank you.
Before we move forward, and Mr. Savage, I know you're next, let me try to make sure we understand exactly what we're discussing. There are 3 issues here tonight, as I see it. The first one is that we refinance. Part of it is Mr. Savage's amendment goes toward the back-end payment, and the other part goes to debt service. The second option that we have is that we refinance, and that it all goes to debt service. The third option is that we don't refinance. So there are actually 3 options, and that's what we're discussing now is Mr. Savage, and it's your Mr. Savage.
The $10 million bonding capacity, how quickly is that achieved with this proposal?
If I'm wrong, Rick, it'd be immediately coming up in next budget year when we have to pay that $730,000 on that bond.
Okay, so now y'all can tell me this. If $730,000 creates $10 million next budget year, $600,000 should create $8 million.
Oh, it does.
Okay. So does everybody understand that? We're not putting ourselves in jeopardy. Plus, we've already done the forecasts. And we're on the hook to pay this money. And we've said we'll pay this money, $14 million a year, until it's all paid off for the next however many years. All I'm wanting to do is help eliminate part of it a little sooner, being a little prudent. There's nothing wrong with sharing the savings, and that's what I'm talking about. We were at 17-something million in 2010 in our debt service fund. Just in the last 2 years, we're going to talk about responsibility and spending money when we had it, We took $3.5 million for capital projects out of debt service, and the prior year we took 2.4. If we had not touched that money, we would be sitting at over $15 million, and that's after paying off a $9 million bond during that time. We took that money ourselves as commissioners, and we decided that we didn't need bonding capacity to pay for this stuff, and now we're saying we got to have bonding capacity. You can't have it both ways. All right, so when you do that, it doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm not even wanting all of it. Like I mentioned last time, I wanted $730,000 for 4 years, which would have helped us out a lot. I'm just asking for $130,000 every year, and that'll help us. And also, it shows to the taxpayer, because the last time we borrowed money, and probably the time before that, I wasn't on the commission. The last time we borrowed money, we raised the property tax 8 cents to do it, so it's not out of the question it's going to happen again. And so if we don't need to try to tell ourselves we're going to do this and never have to raise taxes to borrow money, because we're going to do this other stuff on here. Want to borrow this money, because off part of this, there's no way, no matter. We don't have the capacity. In 10 years, we won't have the capacity until we get rid of some of this debt. And that's my whole purpose of the motion.
Mr. Ebersol.
I really don't have much to add to what Commissioner Savage said. I don't see an issue here. We're talking about less than a penny on the property tax rate of savings going to principal, with keeping all that other stuff going direct to debt service. I think that we owe it to the taxpayers of this county to show them that we are making a good faith effort to lower our debt, the principal on our debt. And we're not talking about a huge amount. Like Commissioner Savage said, we'll have $8 million in capacity the next budget year, which should take care of most anything that we're looking at immediately. And so I'm just in full support of the motion.
Mr. Short.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, this is my 6th year being on this commission and going on 7. There's several that have been here a lot longer than me, but I want to point out that this didn't happen in the last year or so. This has come up because, well, we've acted the same way that people do when they buy a car and they finance it for 7 years when it's going to run out of wheels in 4. And we continued to do that, and we've continued to do that, and so now all of a sudden we're trying to figure out what kind of a Band-Aid we can put on this thing. My caution is that what we've got to do is begin looking at our amortization schedules and not just pay interest only on these debts, because of the 180, 160 to 170 is already schools, and they're going to be looking for more as it is. And I don't know where it's going to come from, but it's only going to come from if we start being good stewards and get rid of this debt. Best way we can.
Mr. Rogers.
I want to be clear. I'm not saying we need debt capacity. The comptroller is saying we need debt capacity. I'm just stating that the comptroller is the regulating authority over what we do and every faucet we have. So I'm just repeating what they're saying, and I've got to go with what they're saying. And either way we go, we're going to have capacity on the front end or the back end. And Mr. Short, I agree with you. We've got to stop backloading debt. But our first principal payment on our next issue, that's why we pay higher principal. And if we have more debt service, we can pay higher principal.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Wiseman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It doesn't take far to look around, and we start looking around at the nation and even personal debt issues. We definitely have a debt crisis around different areas, whether it's the nation or personal, corporate, whatever way you want to look at it. But we don't have to look far. If in our own county we get to the point where we start having issues with our own debt as well. So for that reason, to try to pay a little more on the principal and try to be sure that we're keeping our debt managed well, I'm going to be supporting Mr. Savage's motion. That's all I've got to say.
If I may, I'm going to ask our financial advisor. If you read the material stated that he works for us. that his only interest is to offer advice to us, so we pay him to do that. So my question is, given the two options, give us the pros and cons, if you will, if you can do that.
Okay. Well, I think there's three options that you identified. The first one is whether you do this or not. And I would say to you, take advantage of what the market is offering you today and save money for this county. Now, how you go about that obviously is a policy issue, and we have really two policy options on the table. One, where you take the savings over the next 10 years without extending the debt. You take it each and every year as you go out. That is a very prudent way of doing business. It is one, I've been doing this for about 30 years now, actually 30 years in January. And I would say 90 to 95% of the time, most of the savings that counties, cities, and other jurisdictions across this state do is do an equal amount of savings, or the savings so that every year you have about the same amount. What I would call level savings. That's the reason that recommendation was made by our office to Mr. Porter, and Mr. Porter, of course, has carried that forward to you. Again, it's a policy decision that I can't make. With respect to saving some money, obviously, if you used all the money, you would have no every year to close off, shorten the debt up a little bit. Have any other needs? Ability is a key of what we're doing here. Known which we're embarking on is key and is very important. The comment was made earlier by Commissioner Martin to me, cash is king, and that's exactly right. Cash is king. Rather than using all your money, I think it's important to have good, solid fund balances, because that allows this county to have a good, strong credit rating when you step out in the marketplace, no matter what it is, or no matter what your future borrowing needs are, to have a good, strong credit rating, which you do, AA2. Among a variety of metrics or measurements that credit rating people look at, one of the key ones is fund balance and the flexibility that you have there. And we've been looking at, I guess, some of the history here. We've looked at sales tax collections in this county. Obviously, they've been pretty good in recent years, but at times when we've been in the trough of a downturn, we've all seen what's happened there. That's a pretty revenue stream that moves a great deal. The same is true where the economy addresses your hotel motel tax, which is another key driver of what you fund your debt service with. So I would say, again, cash is king, right, Mr. Martin? And flexibility going forward. You have some knowns out there. You're a growing county. To have the ability to be able to deal with those issues without having to go back to taxpayers immediately, as you would be when you have no bonding capacity, would not be the preferred route. Somewhere in between, you could probably make work. We could all make whatever you need work, and whatever this group decides from a policy perspective work. But back to where I started, the most important thing is to try to take advantage of rates, to do this as quickly as we possibly can, so that we have some good savings. We bring down what are very good rates, actually, 4.75%. Bring that down even lower and save some measurable dollars for this county.
Thank you, sir. And would you state your name? I'm sorry, for our record.
For the record, I'm Rick Delaney, Managing Director with Raymond James in Nashville.
Thank you, Mr. Rick. Mr. Medley.
I have a question. How long have you been county financial manager?
I've been working with Mr. Porter probably for a couple of months.
You're the new one, or?
Yes, sir. I am. I'm the new guy on the block.
Are there any other questions on the amendment? Again, please let me try to make it clear. We're voting to refinance. We're voting with the savings from the refinance to spend $130,000 toward the backside of the debt to pay off principal, and the remainder to go into debt service. Is that correct, Mr. Savage? Anybody have any question about the amendment? All right, Mr. Clerk.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you take your handsets, voting on the amendment only. If you favor the amendment, vote yes. If you do not favor the amendment, vote no. Everyone please vote and stop right there for me, please. Ms. Bowman. All right, all votes are in. Does anyone wish to change their vote anywhere? All right, ladies and gentlemen, please press confirm for me if you would, please. Everyone press confirm. Mr. Chairman, you have 14 voting yes, 9 no, 1 absent, 0 abstain. The amendment passes.
All right, now we're voting on the original motion as amended.
Give me just a second.
Mr. Porter, you want to speak?
I just want to make sure to clarify what you just passed. We come down to the selling this bond, redoing the bond, and I understand Chris's motion on the $130,000 if it's above $600,000. What if it's below $600,000? Do you still want the $130 no matter what the amount is?
I want $600,000 to go to debt service. So if it comes in at $690, it'll be $90,000 savings. I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure. I don't want any more than $130. I don't want any less than $600,000. Whatever y'all can do, y'all can do.
Well, I'm confused then, because that's not what I understood at all. I understood, and I asked the question, did you want $130,000 to go toward, and that's what we voted on. That's what I took the motion to be, and that's what I expected it to be. I did ask the question, told me, is that you, 1,000, it would go toward.
Keep it that way. That's fine. We'll just do the $130.
Okay. So the answer to your question.
And I know what Chris is saying now and what he said before. Doing the $600,000 where that's the amount that automatically goes in will be a lot easier on me when we get to the day of selling the bond. Because you could get down to where that's only $5 million, and then all of a sudden the savings may not be worth all the expense we'll do. I want to clarify what you want though, as to what you want to do.
I'm going to have to, I guess, refer or defer to our parliamentarian then, because the motion that I put before the commission that I understood was that $130,000 would go toward paying off, and whatever was left would go toward debt service. That the solid number was $130,000. That's what we discussed, and that's what I presented as the motion, and that's what we just voted on.
That's what I wrote down.
You are correct, Mr.
$130,000 goes to principal.
We're fixing.
600 or whatever goes to debt service. Am I correct? I want to make sure I've written it down correct.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. All right.
Okay.
All right. That's the pass.
We have amended the motion. Now we're going to vote on the motion as amended. Basically, we're voting for the same thing, that we do refinance the debt, and that the amounts of money appropriated will be $130 toward principal, and the remainder toward debt service. Does everybody understand the motion? Anybody have any questions? Let's make sure. I don't want anybody confused what we're voting on. All right, Mr. Clerk.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you take your handsets, if you favor the motion as amended, vote yes. If you do not favor the motion as amended, vote no. Everyone please vote, and stop right there for me, please. All votes are in. Anyone wish to change their vote anywhere? All right, ladies and gentlemen, please press confirm for me if you would. Everybody press confirm. Mr. Chairman, you have 20 voting yes, 3 no, 1 absent. Motion carries.
All right.
Hang on just a second.
Mr. Savage, item D, I guess.
Fiscal Review recommends approval to apply for a solid waste tire cleanup grant with no match requirement, and I so move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Once again, we can voice vote. Any discussion on the motion? Favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, no. Motion carries.
That concludes fiscal review.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nominating committee?
Mr. Chairman, nominating committee has no business.
Thank you, sir. Report of special committees. Resolutions.
There are no resolutions, Mr. Chairman.
Election of notaries.
W.I. Howell Acuff, Tyler Asher, Tyler D. Atkinson, Jeanette C. Barton, Catherine E. Bushel, Sharon J. Cole, Matthew Curtis, Henry D. Fincher, Linda Fisk, Michelle L. Freeman, Alton G. Freeman, Kara L. Kimbrough, Debbie K. Ray, Matthew T. Sylvie, Denise Smiley, Charlotte Suggs, Michelle Sweet, Cynthia D. Winchester.
Motion to approve.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mrs. Clark.
All right, we have to vote, we have to do this one, so if you favor the motion with the notaries, please vote yes. If you do not favor the motion, vote no. Everyone, please vote. Stop right there for me, please. All votes, Mr. Ford. All right, thank you. All votes in. Anyone wish to change their vote now, please press confirm for me, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody pressing confirm. Mr. Honeycutt. There you go. Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, all 23 vote yes, 0 no, 1 absent, 0 abstain. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Other new business, item 1 is we just need to acknowledge the letter from the Comptroller of the Treasury's Office on the approval of the fiscal year 2017 budget. Any statement or comments you need to make, Mr. Porter, just a matter of, for our record. Item 2 is the acknowledgement of the appointment to the Bangham Utility District, Mr. Richard Norton, term to expire May 19th of 2020. This also requires no action but needs to be incorporated into the minutes.
Got it.
And item 3, ratification of County Executive Randy Porter's appointments to the Adult Oriented Entertainment Board as follows. Entry, Jerry.
Normally use service like they are. I just want
Motion. Aye, saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Commissioners, wish you all a Merry Christmas. I hope each of you have a great holiday season. Any other business to come before the body?
Motion to adjourn.
So moved. We are adjourned.